Great. Okay, we go to the first slide. So, kia ora everybody. Welcome webinars, or should I say AML junkies. Welcome to another webinar. This is hosted by Vigilance, and we've got another expert we're going to be talking to today. So the discussion today is only 25 minutes, short and punchy. So we're going to crack through it. Just for those who haven't attended these before, this is a 25-minute webinar. There'll be a 5-minute interactive web survey at the end. It's interview style, so I'll be interviewing our guest, who I'll introduce you to shortly. Viewers can submit questions. You can do this anonymously, but if we can't get to your questions or haven't answered them in the video, then if you don't ask them anonymously, then we can come back to you separately. We'll run a poll. They're always fun, probably about the middle of this webinar, and there'll be some questions. Everybody can participate in that. And then, of course, this webinar will be recorded, and we'll send a link around in a few days when we post that. And at the end of this webinar, just when you close out, a quick survey pops up on the screen, and those who want CPD points or hours, we can send a certificate of attendance on that. But that survey is really important also for your opportunity to give us feedback on how we did, but also what you might like to listen to. So give us the really curly ones. I know we're all interested in, you know, the tricky stuff, and hopefully we cover some of that today. So I've got Monique Villar just off camera, who's running the webinar. She'll be keeping us on point with time, very fastidious, and because we haven't got much time, we want to get this done on time, 25 minutes. So welcome, Andrew Gibbon-Price. Your bio has been posted, so people should have read about you, but 15 years background in AML compliance, so you're definitely qualified after being involved with banks and others in phase one.
Yes, 15 years corporate tax advisory experience, AML for about the last 6 or 7 years.
Right, okay, yeah. So you're newbie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, but yeah. Certainly for those that are phase two entities, and incidentally this audience today is a mixture of phase two, be accountants, lawyers, real estate, but there'll also be, well, in fact, welcome to the DIA participants. We've got a few of you today. Hope you're not using this as a training session. And for the rest of the audience, there's also phase one entities here, so hopefully we cover everything, because everybody does CDD. Okay, so let's crack into the first slide. So why does CDD become so hard? You know, it's relatively simple at certain levels, but it does become confusing. Understanding the Act, code of practice, guidance, and particularly conjecture from peers, perhaps misinformation from others in the, what I call the AML ecosystem. And resourcing, you know, not having the resources after this new legislation that's being foisted on many people as they feel. You know, it's underestimated and the expertise required, along with you know, the fact that it's time consuming. And so hopefully some of the stuff we cover today will help cut out some of the unnecessary CDD you may be doing, or streamlining those processes. Now the consequences, this is the disclaimer, the consequences of not doing your CDD or any of your compliance is there's potential reputational damage, obviously, of course fines at the extreme end, but retrospective work, if you don't get your CDD done properly and it's found to be wanting in the future, then you're going to have to retrospectively, and that's non-revenue producing activity, so you don't want to be facing that, let alone badgering your clients in the future that you got it wrong in the first place. So compliance is not an option, you need to embrace it, and that's what we're doing. We're trying to help you know, lighten the expectation or the understanding around you know, getting rid of all the concerns as much as possible. So next slide, Monique. So CDD, this is the when, what, and how. So these first 3 dot points are basic stuff. It's, you know, is it a capture activity or not? You need to understand obviously what a capture activity is. If you don't, then, and we're not going to cover that today because you should do, that will lead you into a better path already. And also this is an existing customer or not. We'll cover that a little bit more in a minute. And assessing the risk, really, this whole thing consistently comes back to risk, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the whole AML Act is crafted around this concept of risk, assessing the risk, applying risk to the services you provide, the customers that you service.
And once you grasp that simple concept, you're away.
Yes.
Effectively. So,
yeah.
So far so good. Okay, so when is CDD required? When the customer activity is captured, can we talk about that a little bit, Andrew?
Yeah, so you have to do CDD. I mean, so if you're providing captured activities to a client or a customer, you have to sort of go through the AML. The AML rules apply. And at that point, you have to conduct CDD before you start the business relationship with that customer.
So that's
or
really,
conduct the occasional transaction.
That's really the first trigger, isn't it? Is this a captured activity for the nature and purpose of the business with my customer?
Yeah, that should be the first step. Are you providing captured activities to your customer?
Yeah, as opposed to necessarily or unnecessarily doing it for all customers, whether they're captured or not. Some might consider that, and if that's their policy, fine, as long as that's their policy.
Yeah, some people do have that policy. I mean, if the majority of the service they're providing are captured activities, then they'll conduct CDD on everybody.
Right.
They don't have to, but they can choose to do that.
So nature and purpose of the business, that's you've got to have an understanding of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you have to know, in order to conduct CDD, that's sort of one of the primary things. You have to know what is the purpose of the business relationship. What is the client sort of seeking from you? With
risk in the back of your mind all the time. You're evaluating the risk.
Exactly, because I mean, you risk assess the services that you provide, so you have to categorize, where's that customer going to fall into in terms of the services you're providing.
Okay, so I've got some gotchas here. When the customer was active, whether the customer is active or inactive, we see this with our customers when we onboard them. Some have like tens of thousands of customers. So if they're inactive and you haven't had a relationship with them, or active, say as a lawyer, a matter with the lawyer, with the customer as a lawyer at the time of your compliance date, that potentially is an inactive customer. Yeah,
potentially. So the question is, do you have a business relationship with the customer? If they're an existing customer before the AML rules came into force for your business, then you don't necessarily have to conduct CDD on them. So that's quite a critical distinction as to whether they are you have a business relationship with them or not on when the AML rules started to apply to you.
Right.
Some may be inactive. You may not necessarily have a business relationship with them if you've conducted one-off transactions with them. They may be in your database, but you may not have an existing engagement letter with them, for example.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Everybody's got a database, whether it's a practice management suite or a CRM or something. They've got their customers in a list somewhere. It's going to be electronic, hopefully secure, and that information is records of their customer, not necessarily AML, just before the compliance date came in. So they need to determine whether they're active or inactive and what that means.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Because that's helpful for the processing. So the next gotcha, if Monique can just move that off the screen, back one, please. You're not driving this very well today. Gotcha number 2. So the customer's existing CDD is insufficient. So this is a gotcha a lot of people are suffering because they think they're doing it right.
Yeah.
But this is a point I made before. If they're not doing it right, and it's found to be wanting later, they may be asked, particularly pointed out by an auditor, but if they are perhaps spot checked by DIA or FMA, they might be asked to retrospectively tidy it up.
Yeah, it certainly can be a problem, particularly if the customer is long gone and it's a bit late to be asking them for further information.
Yeah.
It happens sometimes, for example, Enhanced CDD applies and you have to do more than what you've done previously.
Right.
And the customer will may no longer be a customer.
Yeah.
And they're not interested in giving you any information.
Yeah, and as everybody will see, we're going to get into the Enhanced CDD because that's really the nitty-gritty. So I think there's a really simple way to unlock this, and we'll get to that slide in a tick. So number 3 gotcha is, the customer's beneficial ownership changes. To me, that's a tricky one. I've got a line underneath that. This is why ongoing customer monitoring is important. So how do you know if a customer who might be active, their beneficial ownership changes? How do you measure that? How do you keep that in check, particularly if you're audited down the track and challenged on that?
Yeah, so you conduct CDD on new customers or in some cases existing customers if something is triggered. But the Act says you have to conduct ongoing CDD and monitoring, account monitoring of your customers. So that is part of it. You should be doing ongoing CDD of all of your customers.
Yep.
And by doing that, you'll probably see that, oh, there's been a change in ownership or something.
So you need a mechanism to monitor your customers. You've got a database of some nature, so you need to have some triggers in there to be able to, and that comes down to high, medium, low risk. You'll pair them up saying, well, if they're high risk, we need to do them every 6 months, whatever it is, given the nature of the business we do and the risk.
Yeah, I mean, that's reasonable. You should have a policy and state any compliance program, and you should sort of do that as well. Document that you've done it. Yeah,
I think it's fair to say that a lot of phase twos have gone and got documents. They may have used templates. They may have got advice. They may not have, but they should have those in place. Yeah. But they're probably learning as they go and enhancing their processes. They may not be going back and changing their documentation, which is actually really, really important to do, to make sure that it's consistent with what you actually execute, so you can demonstrate that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, next slide. So what is required? So this is the what. What is required to conduct adequate CDD? So
first of all, you need to determine who actually is your customer.
Right.
I think that's the first step. In most cases, it will be clear, but in some instances, they may be acting on someone else's behalf.
For instance?
Someone wants to do a transaction, but it's not for them. But it may not be clear. The money may be passing through their accounts.
Right.
So you should ask the question to the customer, are you acting on anyone else's behalf? Then you're sort of, and if there's no other reason to suggest otherwise, then you're probably covered.
Right.
But the question should always be asked. So you have to know your customer, exactly who it is you're acting for.
Yeah, and so a couple of things here. I think we cover a little bit better detail later, but if you're outsourcing a CDD, if you're just blanket outsourcing it, you may be paying unnecessarily because you haven't done a bit of proper checking about who your customer is yourself to assess, and you might be overcooking it.
Yes, exactly. It depends on what outsourcing
or undercooking it.
Or undercooking it, yeah. So the first step is to know exactly who your customer is, and then that is the person you need to do CDD on, and the beneficial owners.
Or the customer unity, because it might be multiple natural people within that customer's entity.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say you've got a company that's clear that's your customer. Identify all of the beneficial owners.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Next slide. So the how. Now, when I put this together, it's patently obvious to me that once you establish who your customer is, you basically can pitch them whole into 3 categories. We're not going to talk about simplified CDD because that's prescriptive. It's in your face. That's what you do. If it's government entity or some others, it's simplified CDD. So we're not going to talk about that. Standard CDD, everybody understands. So I'm not going to talk about the mechanics around that, but where it gets really tricky, and I think this slide for me explains how you can unlock the whole problematic area around CDD. If you understand Enhanced CDD, what Enhanced CDD is and when you have to apply it, then where those question marks I have there are in the slide, you'll know when a natural person scenario changes from a standard CDD to enhanced. So you should really focus on understanding Enhanced CDD, because then it unlocks everything else. Because companies, estates can be standard or enhanced. In the case of trusts, it's prescriptive again, like simplified. A trust is an enhanced CDD, no wriggle room.
Yeah, yeah. So there are prescribed sort of tests as to whether someone is subject to enhanced CDD or standard CDD or simplified. But again, coming back to the risk, you should sort of go back to your risk assessment. Because if you're providing a service to the customer that is classified within your risk assessment as high risk, you should probably be doing enhanced CDD on them. Yeah. Or the customer itself is in a category that you deem to be high risk.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So this is the how. To establish when to do enhanced CDD. So if you understand this, if you've got a good understanding and this is written down in your procedure around establishing it, then you're well on the road to getting it right. And if challenged down the track on any audit, then you can demonstrate you understand this. So what's interesting to me in this list is trusts or vehicles holding personal assets. That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Non-residents, now this is an interesting one, non-residents from a country with insufficient AML said, well, hell, how do I know? Well, suddenly somebody's walked in my door and said, well, we're from Uzbekistan, and well, the nature of their name probably means that you got to do it. But you know, so how do you go about that?
Well, I guess the easiest way would be, well, you can manually check. There are websites you can go out there to check that can give you guidance on that. But I guess the easiest way, if you are using an electronic ID sort of service provider like Vigilance, then it automatically tells you where, because they do those checks.
Yep.
So you can check it yourself manually.
Yeah, we do. We have a country sanction list, so we can see a risk level, and it's all black and white. Equally, there's websites you can look at as well. Companies with nominee shareholders or trusts, or shares in bearers, that's an issue. And bearers probably not a lot, is it very US sort of thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, shares in bearer form is, I mean, it means the company is anonymous. You don't,
it's cash.
Because you don't know who exactly
if you hold this bearer bond, that's cash.
Yeah, exactly. Companies with nominee shareholders is probably a lot more common.
It's very common in New Zealand.
It is, yeah, because I mean, lawyers, accountants, they have trust in companies or service providers where they do act as trustees or shareholders for their customers.
I'm going to throw a curly one in here. So recent reading about nominee shareholders where accountants of real estate companies set up a company to be trustee, professional trustee, or director.
Yeah.
There's some discussion at the moment about those are reporting entities in their own right.
Yes.
Other than they might not have to do an annual report, and a lot of practices won't understand that and won't realise that starting close to the wind well, you've got more work to do there. But the Ministry of Justice is looking at next year bringing in to clarify that, I think, to say that actually if it's a subsidiary, it comes under the umbrella of the parent company, so the law firm or accountancy practice, so you won't have to.
Yeah, I think the DOJ has said that if it's a subsidiary of your practice, then it doesn't need to file a separate AML annual return.
Right.
But it's still a reporting entity.
Yeah.
So what those that are aware of this issue, they're probably incorporated into their designated business group.
Right.
But it's still a reporting entity. Yeah. So it still needs to comply with all the other.
But it can only be part of the designated business group if it's actually a subsidiary and have a shareholding. And if it's a separate company.
And that's what the DOJ has said at this stage, I believe. They sort of made that clarification around the designated business groups.
Right.
But it is, I mean, some are sort of on top of it, some aren't. Some have missed the fact that you've got these trustee companies.
That's a really important one. I'm sorry to throw that in there because I didn't even highlight it as a dot point, but it is of interest. Yeah,
but I guess it's also impacts if you've got a customer that has a 1% shareholding and the name of it is trustee sort of service company, then that probably should make you ask the question, is this a nominee shareholder? If it is.
Right. Oh, in the CDD process.
In the CDD process,
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's two aspects.
So it's a gotcha that we haven't even got here. Good one.
Yeah.
Okay, so customers seeking to conduct complex, unusual, large transactions or unusual patterns of transactions behavior, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, I think that one is again, that whole essence of the act, risk. You're going to have alarm bells if you've got a customer that comes and behaves a bit differently about their normal business you've done in the past with them. You need to be asking some questions.
Yeah, if you regularly get transactions of a couple $100, then suddenly there's millions of dollars showing up.
Yeah.
You should be asking the questions.
Yeah.
Or if it doesn't appear that there's any economic purpose. I mean, usually, again, it's subjective. You have to apply sort of your thoughts to it. But in a lot of cases, it should be common sense. And if you're not sure, ask.
So it may not be a SAR we're not covering today, but it may not be a suspicious activity. It might be just, all the alarm bells here. And again, you need to write it down, document it in your processes so that, if queried on it in the future. So, okay, next one, the customer is involved with a new or developing technology, product that might favour anonymity. The obvious ones are like Bitcoins, cryptocurrencies, which are, there's a lot of, they have to all comply to AML now. So people that have bit wallets, crypto wallets, have to now on board if they even want to exchange over a certain value. So that's been captured. In fact, just as an aside, I've sat in on some really interesting discussions between the FMA and IRD, looking at just asset classing Bitcoins particularly. That's basically becoming gold 2.0. So
yeah,
interesting area. But again, from a CDD perspective, you need to understand your customer's activity.
we do, yeah. So it's when there's technology involved, then there's always should be asking the question: is this tech, something that might favour anonymity?
So I can see that working with a lawyer who sits down and has a real engagement around the business, because they'll be discussing probably that very activity.
Yeah.
But what if you're a real estate company and you're organising the purchase of a house for a client who, how big a conversation do you need to have?
I guess again it comes back to you have to know your customer and understand what the business relationship is. For a real estate agent, it's obvious they're buying or selling a house, or it's a commercial sort of leasing engagement. But again, know your customer and exactly what they're doing. So yeah, it may seem sort of a bit detached what the customer is doing. I just want to sell them a house. Yeah. Sell their house.
But when it becomes enhanced, they're going to have to know source of wealth, the source of the funds.
Correct. Yeah.
Which I think is our next slide. Keeping you busy today.
Yeah, answering questions as well.
All right. Okay. Next, so how to perform enhanced CDD. So let's talk to this.
Yeah, so enhanced CDD requires you to verify the source of wealth. So you need to reasonably sort of take steps to verify that. So there are two parts to CDD. One is identify the customer and then verify.
Yep.
So for enhanced CDD, it's got that extra step. You have to verify the source of wealth or funds. So
that's the only extra step in enhanced.
Well, generally.
Well, in fact, mechanically, there's a whole bunch of stuff you have to collect.
Yeah.
We're not going to cover that today because that rolls into PTRs and things like that for your transaction monitoring. But
yeah. That's the main one, identifying and verifying the source of wealth or fund. So you need to verify it. So you need to get some reasonably sort of satisfy yourself that the documents they're providing verifying where their wealth comes from or where the funds are coming from. For funds will be most likely linked to in a transaction. Yeah, so the occasional transaction.
Yeah, so the source of wealth, I mean, that's, well, the story of how you built your complete asset base, as opposed to source of funds as the funds for the specific transaction. And that makes a lot more sense, and you don't have to go backwards too far.
No, well, generally not. I mean, it is an open question, like how far back should you go? If verification could be a letter of employment, the sale of a property, financial statements of your business.
Your lotto ticket.
Again, your lotto ticket. So again, it's the use of managing your risk. Yeah. So for example, if someone's held a property and they just sold it and they own that property for 5-10 years, you probably don't need to go back any further. But if they bought the property and then sold it within, a month, then you probably want to go a bit further back and say, where did the money come from in that instance? Yeah. So it's subjective.
If it's enhanced,
If it's enhanced.
That's right. Yeah. And so this is problematic around because, when I talk to phase 2 entities, it's like, we're not getting clear answers on a bunch of this stuff. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you understand the Act, it's not the DIA or your supervisor's job to tell you how to do this. It's not prescriptive. You need to decide what your level of risk is and that you've demonstrated you've got a process around that.
Yeah, I mean, there is sort of a lot of complaints that there's not sufficient guidance, but I think it is quite difficult. With CDD, perhaps it could be a little bit better because everybody's doing something a little bit differently. Yeah. Some people I've heard, one particular company has got a 25-page long CDD onboarding form.
And how many customers they got?
Well, in this case, I think the customer walked away and went somewhere else. Yeah. So customer experience is a big sort of issue.
Yep.
You need to collect and verify the information to comply with that, but customer experience is a
Really, really
deal.
important.
You
I
need
think
to make sure.
in phase one entities, finance comes out, really understand that onboarding frictionless customer thing, where phase two are going, oh, how do we do this effectively? So, and meet their compliance.
Yeah.
Okay, so verification method is really important, and the Act isn't clear on it, and there's nothing in the guidelines on that in the code of practice.
Yeah.
Okay, how's it going for time?
Should we got
3 minutes.
3
My
minutes.
God,
3
we're running out
minutes.
of time. Okay.
should we do the quick poll? Or?
Oh yeah, let's throw the poll in now. So we're just throwing up a poll. Everybody should see that on their screen, and we'll let you run through that. So, have you hired anybody for compliance? Yes or no? Have you booked an auditor? Do you outsource your CDD? Question for, there's only 5 questions, I think. So getting some good responses there. Probably only need to run this for another 30 seconds. And we'll share this poll. We won't have time to go through it now, but we'll share this back with everybody because usually they're quite interesting and quite telling, I think, on our. It's helpful for us too. Well, I think everybody sort of, people still going there.
So this is anonymous, this poll.
Yeah, it's anonymous, so we don't know who's doing this. It's just getting general feedback because one of the last question I put in there is it's really interesting to see. We find a lot of AML compliance team feel quite isolated, not having maybe support from their management. I remember meeting a lady who had to pay for her own ticket to go to a conference. The management didn't think it was serious from quite a certain law firm. I won't say who it was or where. That was disappointing to hear. Okay.
So I'm going to end that poll now.
Right, we're going to end that poll, and we did say that we're going to cover very quickly, the outsourcing of the AML CDD, or in fact, you can outsource more than your CDD in certain circumstances, but we won't go into detail around that today. But pros and cons of outsourcing your AML compliance. We talked some of the pros. Obviously, there's high assurance of compliance, or there bloody well should be.
Yeah.
You're getting professionals to help you.
Yeah.
You're unaffected. Your staff is unaffected. You're only as good as your compliance team, and we see a lot of compliance people moving in and around different companies because they're in short demand supply, so the demand is high. And compliance is like our team. We have a developer leave that can have an impact on their business, just as anybody when they lose staff. So that's important. Being able to outsource it will help with that and smooth out any lumps to keep you compliant. There's cost savings, and the cost savings may not appear to be initially the same. Otherwise, you've got an employee on the books doing all of this, but there's the cost of non-compliance that gets in the back pocket down the track potentially.
Yeah, potentially could get expensive if you haven't complied. So
Right.
That's where having a sort of third party look over your work regularly, ensuring what you're doing is correct.
Oversight.
That will be a savings in the long run.
Give you confidence.
Yeah, so something that we're sort of offering now is support to reporting entities to comply. It's called outsourcing, but I think, as it says in the cons, full outsourcing would be quite expensive. For example, if you wanted me to do all of the CDD, I could do it, but it would probably become very expensive.
And you come a bit fragmented as well.
Yeah, fragmented in the sense of where are the records sitting.
Right.
I guess using a platform like Vigilance would make it quite easy.
Yeah.
Well,
that's why
particularly in the oversight and the account monitoring side of things, because I could do it from my desk.
Yeah, you can do it from the comfort of your office, and you can pop in and just see how things are monitored and check.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
yeah.
And that's one thing about cloud.
Yeah.
So the key one is knowing ID. You got to know where the identity data has been collected from. So if you're outsourcing, you need to know where your outsourcer provider is getting that data from, because you could be challenged on that.
And you need to be able to get that data if asked for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even though you have, so the Act specifically allows you to use an agent or someone in your designated business group or another reporting entity.
Yeah.
But if you are asked to provide that CD sort of documentation and verification, you have to produce it.
Yep. Okay. So security is really important. Nobody really looks seriously at that because they're so snowed under with everything else. But GDPR and general security of your data is really important. So keep that in mind. And you need to actually demonstrate, obviously, privacy is important. Okay. So I think that's pretty much us. The rest you can see the pros and cons. How are we going for time? 27 minutes. We're gone over. All right. So fortunately, the survey at the end, guys, is only takes about a minute to fill out. We've got
a couple of long questions there.
Oh, okay. So we've got some questions. You want to read one on that a minute?
So even if the trust is under the 25% threshold, do you still need to do EDD on that trust and get source of wealth? So this is going back to the nomination.
You do, because the trust is, so they've been backwards, and there's been clarification from the supervisors. The trust is is the entity. So you need to do enhanced CDD on that entity. The 25% threshold is referring to the beneficial owners.
Right.
So if
ultimate beneficial owner.
Yeah, so you need to do enhanced CDD on the trust. So and then identify the beneficial owners. So beneficial owner, starting point is someone
that's where the confusion is already, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question.
Okay. Regarding your slide, when a customer activity is captured, do you have to do CDD? Or you have to do CDD. What are your thoughts regarding an existing client onboarded prior to CDD, previously undertaken non-captured activity, but now undertaking captured activity? Would CDD be completed, or would you continue on the basis that the client relationship is an existing pre-AML relationship?
No. So your compliance date was July 1 last year. You had an existing customer that was inactive. In the new, you hadn't done CDD on them because you didn't have to. You start doing work with them inside the new compliance period. You have to do CDD on if it's captured activity. So there's the answer. It's really simple. I mean, I'm not an expert, and I know that answer. So it's about clarity. You have to do it. One final question. We've got a final one there for people.
The trust is not the client, it is the owner.
So I guess, yeah, again, the DIA has, I think it's the DIA has sort of produced clarification on this. So in order to comply with AML rules, you have to identify your customer to set the trust as the customer, and then identify the beneficial owners and verify information required. So legally, from a legal perspective, a trust has trustees. A trust doesn't really exist. There's trustees
that's right. That's
and
exactly
beneficiaries.
Right. The trustees, and that's why trustees actually have the shareholding, because you can't have the trust doesn't own the shares. It's the trustees. That's why you have them. They're the vehicle for the trust. Yeah,
the trustees. And the beneficial owners.
Okay,
so
cool.
the beneficiaries.
All right. Any other questions? Feel free to fire them through by email later. We've run out of time. We've hit 30 minutes, which is pretty good. So I'll just close on the screen. I love this one. It's so elegant in terms of, if you haven't got it written down, it didn't happen. Show me, don't tell me. That's what auditors are going to say. Think about that future audit date. Any questions? Want to know about other services we might be able to help you with? Doesn't cost you anything for a phone call, so there's some details there. Survey when you close out now, guys, and thanks again. We've got a really interesting note coming up at the end of the month on source of wealth and source of the funds, which is a good 30 minutes in its own. So thanks again. Have a great rest of the week. Cheers.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yep.